have a breakout conversation for, let's say, about 15 minutes in 3 different rooms. One room is going to be with Katie. One room is going to be with Lindley. One room is going to be with Joelle. You will again get to choose your rooms, but this time the invitation is to stay in the room. I'll tell you in a moment what each of the rooms will be about. Actually, I'll ask Lindley and Katie and Joelle to tell you. And it's going to be a conversation around these kind of like key themes, the 3 themes that they identified as what they think are the most important themes around this concept of building and supporting movements. We will use the principle of move your feet. So after about 5 minutes in the room that you choose, if you want to hop into another room, that's okay. So if you're just like, oh, I really want to be a part of 2 conversations, then we accept that. Sometimes also this happens that only one person shows up in one room. But we find that I once heard somebody say that the most enriching open space I had was when one person showed up. It's a blow to my ego, but it also was very, very powerful. So we'll see what happens. The 3 rooms are relationships with Joelle. Lindley will facilitate a conversation around power, and Katie around infrastructure. Can I ask Joelle for you to explain in like 10 seconds what you think you will talk about in terms of relationships in that group?
I think I want to more than talk, also hear about what people are experiencing around the relationship with their partners, hard conversations, what works, what doesn't work in relationship building.
Thank you, Katie. Lindley, power.
Oh, the juicy topic of power. We're gonna talk about the thing that is ineffable and only ever able to like be alive and kind of like in relationship with in this moment, and also the thing that determines and has determined our poly crisis and what we most need to change in order to change how we resource movements and also how we build movements. Although I know someone critiqued the word build, how we weave movements as well.
Katie, infrastructure.
This is hard. I want to go to both of those breakouts. But we'll be talking on infrastructure. So this will be getting a little bit more in kind of the weeds of what it looks like to support movements. I think all of you are in this field, and I'll share a little bit about how we think about funding and supporting movements, but I also really want to open it up to hear from all of you and share what's worked, what hasn't. So this will be kind of get into the weeds if you're interested in kind of getting into kind of the practice of it.
Okay, thank you. Rooms are open. Choose your room. If you need help or confused, I can help you.
The song I've been listening to with my kids the past few months, and I've desperately wanted to play it in a future event. It's so goofy, but it's also like so. It's like so. It's what we talk about all the time. My friends, my friends are your friends. Oh, the more we learn together, the happier we'll be. Anyway, I sorry, I just can't help myself. I want to invite the last few minutes to get to, and I want to make sure this is recorded because we want to share this out, to get to the heart of what the topic of today's session is. I feel like we've been doing all these building blocks, but the real heart of what we're trying to talk about today is how do we convince, I don't know if that's the right word, or how do we shift funders and philanthropy to support movement building? And I know Joelle, Lindley, and Katie, you all 3 have a lot to say about that. So I would like to invite you, I'm going to spotlight all 3 of you again. I'd like you to invite you this time to unmute yourselves and to have a conversation with each other. I like to do this kind of dinner table style dialogue where you're talking on top of each other, you're arguing with each other, you're contradicting each other. And we'll do this for about I'm almost to the end of the space, but we'll leave for everybody a bit of a moment for collective closing. And I think, what I'd really, oh no, actually, I know what I wanted to do. I want to do rather than, I changed my mind, sorry. Rather than doing I have to find myself to be here too. Rather than doing a dinner table dialogue, I'd like to do a bit of a role play where each of you are trying to convince me, who's the very skeptical funder, as to why investing in movements is important. And so I'm going to start by just asking you three to give me the pitch. What is it that I mean, just as a bit of context, I mean, all three of you know, but I invited all three of you to the table because you're all trying to work with movements in the environmental space. We fund a lot of environmental projects, not much movement building. We're curious about it, but most of our projects are focused on, kind of innovations. And we think that's the most important thing, investing in actual kind of like innovations that can be designed and can quickly replicated across the world, because we think that's what is going to really accelerate the change to this crisis that we have. But I know some of you think differently, so I'm willing to give you just a few minutes to convince me otherwise.
I will start by saying that I really believe that the way we are going to tackle the crisis of climate change is not going to be so technical, in the sense that what I feel is what I'm learning in Latin America, and what I feel very strongly in my life is that when we feel the earth, when we have a relationship with the earth, and when we feel each other as part of it, then from there we're able to really move in a way that allows for each individual to count and for everything to sum up. So for me, allowing for funding to grassroots groups, small organizations, movements that are connecting all of this fabric of organizations that are looking at different relationships with this problem is the way we tackle a problem. Because if we're just trying to find one solution, like, okay, technical innovation, can be definitely one of them. But what does it look like when we permit all of this diversity of solutions to come together? There something else happens, and that's what we really need right now. I feel this crisis calls for all these different ways of doing it. So funding movements is a way to give oxygen to this possibility to look for different ways of finding a new relationship with the earth, a new relationship with ourselves. That's what I will start with.
Thank you, Joelle. I can build on that. So, Brandon, I know you're really interested in these what you call innovations, and I think you used the word like specific strategies, which I think is admirable. Right? There's it's really tempting and alluring. Isolate, especially because our human minds aren't structured to hold the complexity of what's unfolding. So we're really tempted to have a very narrow problem definition so that we can then invest in a narrow solution to that problem. But what we miss out on is the fact that we're actually in a predicament, and we're dealing with something that often theorists call a wicked problem. So there's not one solution. There's actually not even a set of solutions. We have to kind of surrender to the complexity and the mystery of this being way bigger than any of our like logic models can hold. And within that, there's actually infinite possibilities. So it's actually quite an exciting opportunity to relinquish our attachment to there being a very specific problem and a specific solution. And I just want to highlight that there's so much research now that shows that when we take a very narrow problem definition, we actually create more problems, because that narrow solution, then, as we've shown in the dominant economy and externalities, and I can give you a million examples of this. Actually, a really quick one is large-scale solar has just as many, if not more, human rights abuses than large-scale fossil fuel industries. So when we replicate the same system, we don't actually solve our problems, and we usually create more of them. The one other thing I'll add is that the power of I already talked about the landless workers movement, so I'm not going to dilute examples of movements, but I will just say that when we're looking at movements, one thing that's really fundamental in my understanding is that they're addressing root causes. So it's taking, again, that problem definition and saying there's actually way more complex systemic drivers at play here. And when we take looking at those systemic drivers, then we can start to be in relationship with people, and most importantly, alliances and coalitions of movements of people that are working together that are actually holding that systemic analysis. That's one of we support thousands of movements of year. Every single one of them holds a systemic analysis. It's not saying like, okay, here's the technology. It's saying, oh, wow, we actually need to consider and incorporate and reflect on how white supremacy and colonialism and all of these things that are really uncomfortable and like icky to try to integrate into our theories of change, but are really important in consideration if we're actually going to, if we're actually serious. If we're actually serious about approaching environmental and climate crises afoot, then we must surrender and like be in relationship to a more systemic understanding of what's unfolding.
All right, I'm taking a ton of notes for my own pitches in the future. This was great. I would just double down on everything that's been said. And I think, Brendan, knowing that you are committed to this problem and you recognize, I think inherently, nobody can deny just the deeply interconnected, complex nature of this problem that we are trying to address. The climate crisis is probably intersecting with every human natural crises that we could imagine, and having short-term, narrow responses is simply not going to win on the timeline that this challenge requires us to operate. And so, continuing your investments and technology, et cetera, is good work, but that is not going to achieve the population scale change that we really need on the timeline that we're on. It's playing whack-a-mole when we really need to be playing at a completely different level. And so I would just encourage you to just look back at the arc of when have you seen scaled systemic social change happen? And we have examples from our past. We can look the drastic shifts in marriage equality in the US, or the cessation of tobacco use in the US. These were significant changes that happened in a short period of time. And all the science and research shows that movements were at the epicenter of those shifts, and that it was the sustained supported funding for those movements, for the people, the organizations that make up a sprawling, growing ecosystem of people and organizations that are working towards these goals that made the difference. And so we have the same opportunity to do that here. And when I look at, for example, as a climate funder for you, there's been huge passage of huge policies recently, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan, huge policies. And yet they'll just be a hollow hope if we don't actually have the power and the people that are organized and able to actually bring those policy visions to life. We really need to make sure that the how is as important as the what in this work. And that's how you create that large scale population level change that I know you are after, not just the whack-a-mole, not just the short term shiny objects, but rather the deep, durable change that we need to actually create a healthier and cleaner world. So hope you'll join us.
I think all of this, I'm very open to this new way of thinking. I have to be honest. I'm only a kind of a one in a C in this foundation, and I would have a lot of trouble convincing my superiors who have to convince their boards. That's one barrier. Another barrier that I see is just how to measure all of this work, but also like we talk a lot about scale, we talk a lot about speed, and it seems that investing, while I understand conceptually the idea of investing in people and relationships and people power, it seems like it's a very slow moving strategy that we don't have time for. And it seems like these big bets are the way to really scale across the world. So I'm just curious if you agree with that or disagree with that. Anybody?
Jump in. Oh, go ahead, Joel.
You're
You're
on mute.
muted.
Sorry. I was saying, yeah, I completely understand that there is so much within an organization, so much dynamics, and that it's important to have these conversations together, like to create spaces where this conversation happens, not just all together within the organization, with your board of director, with your colleagues, and also to sense what actually is being felt and sensed within your organizations by all the individuals that make it up. And maybe you might be surprised about what is moving in them at the personal and what they're perceiving in the collective. So one movement that could happen is to start a bit of a internal research within your institution and seeing how are we thinking about how change is going to happen. And there is lots of research that backs up what we have been discussing, but I think it's very important to have it be digested, that it passes through a process of reflection within your organization, and this is a very first very important step for change. So I would really encourage that to start from within your organization.
Thanks,
To
Joel.
reflect on these topics together.
I only have 2 minutes, Katie and Lindley, but I'm
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly, Brandon, that this has been such a sweet conversation, and I would love to have your trustee in the room. So if we can just continue this conversation with them, that would be great. And I can give you some resources on how to organize up. Second, as I shared earlier, speed and scale is only valuable if it's not taking 2 steps back. And so we also have lots of resources at the Klima Fund on expand. Like, what I really hear from you is that you care about innovation. And so what I would love to be in conversation about is how to expand your understanding of speed and scale. Because if we understand it in a narrow sense, we're going to dig in on things that actually that we slip and are going to stumble backwards. And so expanding our definition of speed and scale so that we are rooting in durable solutions that are actually scaled on a global level, not just in a particular sector or a particular silo that we make up as funders. And so much more to say about that. But Katie.
Everything that's been said, and I think when I hear speed and scale and I hear your focus on innovation, I would just encourage you, sound like you're kind of a portfolio guy, and you're thinking about your investments in a range of different segments as a portfolio. And I would just encourage you to think innovatively about what that portfolio looks like and why movements are not a part of that portfolio, when yet there is such a significant chance for real scale, durable impact, as you heard from all of us. And so if that is how you're thinking about how you put your resources in the field, I would just encourage you to be a little bit more innovative just in terms of how you think about that portfolio, and recognize that the big risky bets are also in the form of movements as well and have the real potential for real scaled impact. So
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lindley. Thank you, Joelle. Our way of signing off, as a lot of you know, is to sign off with a word of thanks in whatever language you choose. And that's our way of saying goodbye to each other. So once you do that, you're welcome to sign off. Actually,
Grazie mille.
thank you, Brendan.
Thank you. Wonderful stuff.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Nice to meet you all.
It was nice to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.